Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Inbound Wins podcast. I hope you're all well. I've got a fantastic guest on today, and I'm really excited about this particular podcast, just because of Justin's background and some of the things he's achieved so far, and of course, the things he's yet to achieve. So it's really, really exciting. Justin, thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate you being on. How are you?
Thanks for having me. Very well, thank you. Yeah, good. Nice start to a Saturday, to a weekend. And glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. Look, I wanted to go straight into it. I know in my other podcasts I'll go through this whole sort of introduction, but I think let's get straight into it.
That's it.
The point of this podcast, I think most people now sort of have an idea of where it sort of goes, is essentially, I want to speak with people who have started something fantastic and break down the process and the steps that they've taken to get to the stage where they're at, and of course draw out their future plans as well. So take us back to where it all started, because I know you've dipped into various different businesses. You're an estate agent as well. Take us right back to the beginning. For a little bit of context, guys, Justin's a property investor. And you're also currently employed as well.
Yeah.
But let's rewind all the way back to the beginning. Where did it all begin? How did sort of this whole concept of getting into property investing? Because most people don't come from a property background, you see. So take us back.
Yeah, I'll try and summarise it quite quick. To say that I am, a new investor, just getting into the game. I've done quite a bit before now. So I started back, I think it was when I was 16, 17. I left college a bit early, went into a estate agency. Property was always kind of like a bit of a family thing. My granddad was a developer, and my parents have always done up and sold houses. So went into estate agency, did 7 years as an estate agent. Loved it, enjoyed it. It's very fast paced. It's a great job. It's very stressful. Eventually I sold a property to someone. They offered me a job, also within sales, but for a trade show exhibition organizer, which is what I do now. I've been doing that for about 3 or coming up to 4 years maybe now. And I love that, because that gives me the flexibility to be able to invest. When I was an estate agent, you're working 6-day weeks, quite often, 8 a.m. till 6 or 7, sometimes later. So to be able to now do what is like a 9 till 5 job and have every weekend free has allowed me to invest and, whilst earning and maintaining a good job. So that's where I'm up to at the moment. I've got one buy-to-let, and just had started my property investment career, I guess, in the sense that I'm looking to scale my portfolio over the next 4 or 5 years to create quite a solid passive income, or as passive as it can be.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Congrats on of course getting the buy-to-let under the belt. Was that your first purchase, or did you go down the route of buying resi first and then going into buy-to-let?
Yeah, that's it. I bought residential about 5 years ago, and then the buy-to-let was last year.
Okay, interesting. That's quite interesting. I suppose where I get a lot of questions about whether I should buy somewhere to live in first, or I should rent somewhere and then invest first. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Personally, I go against the grain a lot on this one, because a lot of gurus and also successful property people as well will tell you just go down the buy-to-let route. Why own something that's a liability, which is what they consider a home? But I personally think that there's a lot of leverage that you can use from your first purchase. There's a lot of stamp duty benefits. There's certain ISAs that you can utilize. So if you can, perhaps maybe you could go out and purchase a property with a 10% deposit that you can add value to, and further down the line refinance and use that money to buy a buy-to-let. Or if you could add value and sell it and then use the funds to buy-to-let. I don't know. I just think that there are benefits there that people don't always consider.
Yes. No, definitely. Because I know when especially in down south, because you benefit from the 10% deposit, most people do, buy somewhere to live in first.
Yeah.
Even when you're developing, I think because now I think it's slightly changed, but you have the tax benefit. If you're developing something, you reside in it for about 18 months, you can defer the tax on that. But like you mentioned, there are so many other benefits of using your prime residence as leverage. But would you ever, for example, borrow against your prime residence, or is it something? Because I know for some people that it's an absolute no-go. Don't touch it. Leave it as it is. You know what I mean? What are your thoughts on that? Would you ever sort of actually?
For the time being, we're not, because I purchased a residential with my partner, and it's very much kind of our own asset, our own thing together. We keep the buy-to-let separate, and our next step right now, we're buying a property that needs a lot of work. That's going to be like a flip project that we move into, again, to utilize the benefits that come to moving in and living within a flip, because there's a lot of benefits around the stamp duty and capital gains tax.
Yeah.
And again, we will just retain, for the time being, we're going to use that as an opportunity to just build up more equity, go to a bigger property, or do a bigger a bigger flip essentially in the future. Further down the line, who knows, we might do. But for the time being, yeah, it's just great to build up our worth and our equity in our home by doing that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And in terms of the first purchase 5 years ago, I think most people are wondering, because how old are you now? 27?
28, yeah.
It's close. A lot of people are wondering, how on earth did you actually save up for the first one, the one that you resided? You mentioned you went halves on it, but how did you raise your part of the deposit?
To be quite frank, it was just saving for a long time. I think when I was maybe 18 or 19, I was like, even then in my head, I knew I want to buy a property, because I work in a estate agency. The natural thing for me to do would be, I see all these people making money from property. I'm going to buy my own one. Obviously, I didn't realise about the buy-to-let and investing at that point, but I thought, right, I'm going to buy a residential home to live in. It's better than, in my opinion, obviously at the time, it's better than renting because the costs are lower. So yeah, I just saved. It did take me quite a few, good 2 years, 3 years, because again, I wasn't earning a huge amount at that point and was just saving and also going out a lot. So it was a balance of them all. But it's quite hard down south because prices are high. But again, we used a 10% deposit, and we've been lucky. It's been a good first purchase.
Yeah. Did you do any research in it at all, or what was because I know with your prime residence, it's normally driven by emotion, the purchase. For you, working as an estate agent, was there any thought behind, right, yes, we're going to live in it, but we also have to look at it as an investment as well? Was there any sort of discussion about that at all?
There is a bit. It's a fine line that you have to balance, and we almost didn't go for it because of that. But actually, we had to allow some emotion into it in the end, as well as it being a good investment. It had to allow some emotion in, and that's paid off, because again, when you live in a property for 4 or 5 years, inevitably the market goes up. Obviously it goes up and down, but for us it's been a good time, and you look back now and you think, why was I squabbling over £2,000 in negotiation, because it doesn't matter now, it's long gone.
Yeah, no, definitely. And what was that like as well, as what were the emotions like, because you were 22, 23 or so, buying your first property down south? Did you get any help from anyone in terms of just emotional backing? What was the sort of emotion? I know, I work in property as well, and one thing doing it for other people, buying and selling for other people, and it's another thing doing it for yourself and going through the head of solicitors, mortgage brokers, getting the right paperwork, the admin. What was that like for you in terms of just the whole emotion of buying the first place? What was that like?
Yeah, we were lucky. We had a good support network. I obviously had a good network of mortgage advisors, solicitor, and so on, built up from being an estate agent. And my parents obviously very supportive in the sense of, funded it ourselves, but they wanted to back and, and for us to purchase somewhere. So they were supportive in that sense. Having now bought a home and a buy-to-let, I can tell you buying a home, is definitely more stressful than a buy-to-let. Is just a breeze, in terms of the actual stress that's involved with purchasing it. Once you've actually bought it and you've got to rent it out or do work to it, then it is more stressful.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think buying for your prime residence, you've got to think about proving income and all, especially if you're like on a basic salary and commission. It's just proving all of this. It's a nightmare. I know exactly.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting. What made you actually buy with your partner at the time? So how long have you guys been together? That's a very big move as well for people who are considering, should I buy with my partner now? What was the thought process behind that?
Just we've been together a long time, 9 years, and knew that would be the case. I think when you know, and I think, I think it was the right move, just the right step for us at that time. It was either, we hadn't left home, so it was either we buy or we rent, and we were quite adamant that we didn't want to rent at the time. So that was it. Decision made.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And in terms of the figures, if you don't want me sort of going into that, I know you're wondering, okay, how much does it cost? You're down south. What were the figures like? So how much did you actually buy it for? And was there any work that needed to be sort of carried out on it? What were the figures?
So it's 165. It's 165,000. It's a 1-bed flat.
Okay.
And I mean, it could do it, it needed someone to come in and give it a bit of a spruce up. But generally speaking, it's not like, some of these refurbs you see people doing. It's nothing like that. It was perfectly livable. Just needed someone to come in, spend a bit on it, and which we've slowly done, as I say, the benefit of living down south, whilst you don't get much for your money, is that the capital appreciation tends to be quite good. So it's now worth circa 200 from the works we've done, and also from the market going up as well.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's not bad. So from there, you then a few years later, when did you buy the buy-to-let? Was it last year?
Last year, yeah.
Last year. Okay. So it's a big gap. So was that because just purely down to saving, or were you still in the market doing, what most first-time investors do?
There was a bit of a gap. It was like, right, so I bought the flat, and then I was like, I do want to do property down the line, but in order to do property, I need to build up money quicker. Having gone through that process of saving and knowing how long it takes, I was like, so then I actually took a step away from property in a way, and I launched a clothing business. So I did a clothing brand, direct to consumer, like sportswear, gym wear, and that was 2016 to 2018. So that was 2 years where I built it up from scratch and got quite a good brand name and reputation, a reasonable amount of sales, did a lot of events and things, particularly down south. But that came with its own problems, and when trying to scale a business like that, it needs money, it needs cash, it needs investors. And then it was almost taken completely. It was meant to be something that was going to fuel my property investing, and ended up being its own entity. So eventually in 2018, we decided to, wrapped it up and sold it to a company in Ireland. So I believe it's still going. It's nowhere near like when we looked after it, and it was much love put into it. Whereas now I don't see it as much, or think they've quite held on to it the same way. But it was interesting. Learned a lot from the experience.
Yeah. At the time, were you still working at the estate agency? Or?
Yeah, so I was just doing the transition
from
estate agency to this new sales job in the exhibition world.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you were there for 7 years. Were you sales negotiator, lettings? What were you doing at the time?
Yeah, so I always did sales. So I started off for free, actually, because back in when I started, it was like 2009, 2010. So the market was bad off the back of the last recession. no one was hiring. And in the end, I just went to a company and said, look, what if I just work for you for free for 6 months so I can get some experience, check that I like it. And also everyone was saying we only take on experienced negotiators. So I thought, right, well, I'll do that. So did 6 months voluntary work, and then they gave me a job at the end. So worked my way up then to, from sales negotiator, trainee, then sales negotiator, then senior sales. And then sort of at my last position, it was kind of like lister stroke sales, senior sales negotiator.
Would you advise like somebody, let's say fresh from college or A-levels to do a similar thing, especially because I think right now as well, estate agencies are holding back from hiring, from what I'm just hearing from friends of mine, for instance. 6 months is a long time. I mean, how are you surviving? Did you have another job alongside that, or?
I'd come out of college, I lived at home. Yeah. Parents were very kind to me. Okay. So I think I worked part-time in a car garage at the time, but I didn't live off of much money or require much money. So, and I don't know why, I just thought it was a good idea. And obviously it was eventually, but.
Yeah. What did the family say about that? Did they have any sort of input?
Again, they supported it. They knew I wanted to do it, and they saw that I was trying to get a job and not able to because of the market. They knew the agent because they'd had previous dealings with them. My grandfather had worked a lot with them and bought houses from them at auction and stuff. So it was just, they thought, if that's what he wants to do, crack on. So I was lucky.
Yeah. So you pretty much had your mind set out that you want to get into property by some shape or form.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, when I went to college, I didn't. I did sports and business and accounting, but it was definitely something I wanted to do. I realised quite early on I wanted to do, and having gone to college, I then realised, I do want to go straight into this after.
Yeah. Well, what were the highlights of working at an estate agency? Because I know there's a lot of people that DM me on Instagram. And they asked me, what are the best ways to get into property? Should I be a surveyor? Should I work in an estate agency? Should I work for a property investment company? So like for yourself, for your own experience, what advice would you give someone who's just starting out and going into an estate agency role or something like that?
Yeah, I think, estate agency is great. There's a lot of highs, there's a lot of lows. So as a salesperson, you've got to learn to ride out the lows. They can be, when there's not many sales coming in, you've just got to continue putting in that work no matter what. But yeah, I personally, as I say, apart from the stress side of it and the lack of free time, because you're often doing 5 or 6 day weeks, it's a great job. And, there's a lot of camaraderie, the people that you work with. And, I would say one of the best things I did was move around a bit as well. A lot of people might go to one agency and they'll stay there 10 or 15 years, and you can get a little bit stagnant maybe. Yeah. I tended, perhaps maybe too much, I moved every 2.5 years. So, I was only in it for 7 years, but I worked for 4 different estate agencies. And again, because every time you move, you learn new stuff, you do the new training, and it really gives you a chance to freshen up your sales skills and get, be hungry for it,
Yeah. No, that's quite cool. I mean, one thing I always wonder with, estate agencies and the sales side of things is, of course, you get paid on successful completion, I think. Yeah. So, and a lot of these, were you doing predominantly residential sales? So people buying to live in, or was it a bit of both?
Yeah, mainly, especially in my earlier years, was residential. When I moved to an agency in Brighton, which is main city down here on the south, there was a lot of investors. Because again, I think I worked there in like 2014, 2015. At that time, the market in Brighton was really coming up. It was really a good place for investors to come. So yeah, we worked with a lot of people, and then I guess that's kind of what opened my eyes a bit more to the investment world. Saw these, I was working with a lot of people with, a lot of free time, fancy cars and nice suits, and, they'd just be doing whatever, on their own diary, basically, on their own time scale. And I think that's kind of where I sort of thought, well, what are these guys doing that I'm not? They don't seem to be working so hard. They obviously are, but in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Because one thing as well, with anyone that is going into sales roles or working with people with, for example, your clientele are people that have saved up large sums of money, and as a result of that, they've obviously done something right in life. So,
Yeah.
were you ever, for instance, not necessarily sort of anxious to deal with these people, but was it just natural for you to sort of deal with, like you said, dealing with people who are successful, working on their own calendar? They carry themselves in a different way as well. How did you sort of go about dealing with these people? Were you sort of hesitant, or were you just like, they're just human beings?
Yeah, I think at first they came across quite intimidating, but you do soon realise that the majority of them they're good humans. They're just humans deep down. They've just perhaps, arguably they've done a little bit better than other people. They've got nicer, they're worth more. They've got slightly nicer things, but actually to the core of most of them, they're exactly the same. They just want to make relationships, be nice people, and so yeah, they come across intimidating. But if you just have a laugh, find out what they really want to buy, and then you can actually, they're some of the best people to build relationships with, because they'll come back and they'll buy time and time again.
And one of them actually, invited you over to start working for them.
Yeah.
So how did that come about? So obviously you've done the sale for them, and then you've now sort of crossed over into a whole different industry. Was it easy for you to leave the sort of the estate agency career behind? That's a massive shift. I know you like to move every 2.5 years. Another industry, that's massive. What was that?
No, it's really difficult, because I loved the estate agency so much, because it was property and I was leaving property. I had to think of the bigger picture, and that I would do property, but in my own way rather than working for someone else. But it took a while. I sold. So that was a residential purchase. The gentleman that bought it, I think I'd provided a very good service. We'd had a good rapport, and I'd helped him through what was quite a difficult time. But he tried for maybe a year and a half before I actually said yes. He offered me a couple of roles before. He was very good, very patient, and eventually I took the plunge. And yeah, as I say, it's been worth it, because now that I've got out of that world, I've got so much more free time to be able to put into my own property investing.
Yeah. And would one of the reasons be as well, for example, leaving the estate agency role and focusing on your own property? Is it a case of the whole non-compete politics type thing within the industry, or was that something that you were considering?
A little bit. I didn't. Now more, because now I work so much in it. But at the end of the day, I don't invest in the areas that I was working, so it wouldn't have been the end of the world. But however, now that I do things like YouTube and Instagram, I do think it's a bit of a blessing, because there would have been a bit more of a conflict, I reckon.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because, like I said, I mean, that's a lot of, for example, my friends consider and think about. But and me personally as well, when I was working for my previous firm, it's you cannot be as loud on Instagram and do things that you're doing, just because it's like, what you're doing, you're not promoting the company. So I know the thought process. So you've crossed over now, and which is where you're working at the moment. So that's sort of exhibitions. What's it for? So who are the events that you're organising? Is it for?
Yeah, so we do it in all sorts of different industries. Computing, accounting, food. So I work for a company in Brighton, but obviously all the events are up in London, and they'll have at a minimum, the smaller shows have like 3,000 or 4,000, and then the bigger shows have 10, 11, 12,000 people turn up on the 2 days. And yeah, I mean, obviously this year's been we haven't been able to run any, so it's been a challenge. We've had to adapt and go online and so on. But yeah, so it's very different from what I was used to. But it's been nice to switch over. When you work for an estate agency that's, particularly the local ones, it's lovely and nice to be part of a team where you work with the owner day in, day out. But of course, you'll never have the same opportunity as someone that works in a firm of 100, maybe, where there's constantly people moving around into different roles. There's constantly growth. So it was nice to experience that as well a bit. There's pluses and minuses to each, but to be part of a big company, to be given more opportunity, has been nice as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think everyone should experience, although there's benefits of working directly with like the director and the MD, for instance, because you just get all the golden nuggets. You get, they've got a lot more time for you as well because they want the business to do well. But I think it's also beneficial to work in a massive firm where you're exposed to various different sort of roles. But like I said, they all have its pros and cons. So you've been there for how long now?
I think it's coming up to 4 years.
4 years.
It's definitely over 3 years, and I'm sure it's coming up to probably in like Jan or February.
Yeah.
I left for like a month at one point, but went straight back.
Why is that?
Just again, thought I needed a change. Thought I was like, right, I need to, and it immediately impacted my investing, my side hustle stuff, So, and also they came straight back to me and said, look, what if we created a different role that you'd be more happy with? And at the time, I was really glad that they did,
Yeah.
So
really sort of, they see you as an asset, which is quite cool.
Yeah, it was very nice.
Yeah. Just going on to these side hustles, I think it's really interesting. I mean, you dropped it in there 2 or 3 times. Let's sort of deep dive into it. So, this at the time you're transitioning into the new role, and then you launched the clothing brand.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any particular reason you went into like a clothing brand? Because it's not an easy gig to sort of get into.
I didn't. Yeah, you're right. It's not an easy gig to go into. And I perhaps didn't give that enough consideration when starting. I kind of, I like to, for the the good or the bad, I like to take action a lot of the time. And but no, it was very much, I'm big into health and fitness and going to the gym every day. I saw what some of these companies were creating and thought, it needs to be mixed up a bit. The designs are a bit plain and they're a bit boring, and perhaps bring in more of a design element. And so I worked with some manufacturers in Turkey and Portugal and got some clothing created. And so that was the first one. Again, wasn't the biggest success in terms of monetary value, because when we sold it, we got out what we put in and a bit more, but, it wasn't a big, monetary success. However, the experience gained from that to then bring over to the future and how to systemize things, how to, almost set up a business so it's ready to scale, if that makes sense. I learned a lot of lessons like that, which I could then bring to things I do now. So that was the useful and the experience that I gained from it, I'd say.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because you learn the sort of different processes to scaling up a business, and at times you have to wear different hats. Business owner, you see. So at that point, because obviously, you had the exit in place, which is quite cool. Not many people can say they've done that. So to have that ticked off is quite cool. What was that like? Was there, I think most people are not really familiar with an acquisition and stuff like that. So how was it? How did it come about? Did they reach out to you?
So no, I actively thought about it. So at the time, it was like, I think I need to focus on the property investing, but I've got so much invested into this. What do? I can't just leave it. It's a functioning business. We're getting orders. We've got customers, and we've still got stock. Yeah. And then I thought, well, I wonder if it's easy to sell. I wonder how easy it is. So I looked up how to, put together your sale, like a sales pack for a business, how to pull your revenues, and present them in a way in which a buyer might be interested. So I found out how to do that online and watch some videos, put it all together, and I put it out there online for through a sales portal. And within a couple of weeks, I'd had like 2 or 3 people interested, and then I just went with the one. I didn't go with the highest offer, but I went with the mid offer that could complete the quickest. And it was kind of done in an American way. We did it through what's like known as a bit like escrow, because it was done through an American website. It was so the buyer, I accept the offer, the buyer transfers the money to escrow, where it holds the funds, and then I have to do my duties, which is transferring accounts and personal details of the business over. I shut the actual limited company down from the UK, and then the buyer set it up, but he had, obviously everything stock-wise was sent over to them and that. So, it was maybe a month total, which was better, an easier process than I thought.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's a strategy in itself, set up a business, scale it up, list it on this portal, get it sold, do it again.
Yeah.
And pick it all up from the internet, which is just testament to, what you can learn nowadays. I know for a fact when, I'm setting up and growing this business at the moment.
Yeah.
At times when you're employed, you turn around, you ask your MD, you ask someone for something. Now you've got to find out yourself how it works, then implement it. Does it work? Does it not work? Then go back to the drawing board if it doesn't, etc. So that's cool.
Yeah.
And so you obviously exited that business. And were those funds you now used for the buy-to-let?
Yeah, a bit of them were. I still had to do a huge amount of saving. Yeah. And I just did anything I could, cut back on my expenses for just under a year, saved hard, because I wanted to make sure I had just a bit more than I needed for like contingency and that. So, yeah.
So that takes us to the buy-to-let. What was the process behind that? Because where's the buy-to-let, by the way?
It's in Liverpool.
Liverpool, wow. So that's quite far up. So yeah, what was the process behind that? Picking the area, and all the things that comes with that. The management, the refurb. Talk us through that buy-to-let process.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, it was a long process. I had that whole year to educate myself while saving, and I looked at so many different areas and cities as potentials. I felt that Liverpool, and still is and was, a good place to invest because, the prices are cheap and the cash flow from the properties isn't bad. The yield and the return on your investment is quite good. And for me, for the first few properties, that's the focus. I want to generate money from them, which I can then put towards buying future properties. And then as I grow my portfolio, I'll probably look to invest a bit more down south, because then I can build up my net worth, the overall wealth, by doing that. So, but yeah, when I compared, Liverpool, when you look at areas like Birmingham, Manchester, previous years, 2016, 2017 and so on, they had kind of like a bit of a little boom, each one of them, because they were good cities. They had the fundamentals, they got the right investment and builds coming in. So I looked at Liverpool and thought, well, it has the same. It has, big companies there, big distribution centres around it. It's got the fundamentals like transport, university, city centre. So, and then on top of that, it's cheap in comparison to houses down here. So.
Right. And what resources do you use? Obviously, you've been working at an estate agency, but I know a lot of estate agents who don't have a single clue about investing and the jargon and the research points and stuff that you need to know before you invest. So did you use any sort of resources to educate yourself over that year that you were sort of revising the market?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of, really great podcast books and I did what I can to just self-educate, and that just being able to have the time to read and learn it. Obviously there's certain websites as well, but really where I learned a lot, but still there was room to learn more, was YouTube, watching videos of other people. Unfortunately there wasn't many on how to buy and set up a single let in a limited company, but there were lots on HMOs and rent to rent and stuff. So watched a few of them as well, learnt a bit from there.
Nice. So you found your location, you've done all the research. Did you go in sort of many viewings? Because I know there's some people who it's a numbers game for them. So they see 20, 30, 40, 50 plus properties and to find the one. And then there's some individuals, they look at a handful and they just go for it, like I said. So for you, what was the process like?
I was probably in between, I reckon.
Okay.
I was I did a lot of viewings and trips, but I think it was a mixture of them both. Equally, I just found one. I was like, this one will work. I reckon I could put in, relatively low offer, get it for the price I want, and it will cash flow quite well. So between the two, it wasn't my, first trip up, but it was, I'd done a few over several months, learnt the city. And then this one, I'd offered on other properties, but again, being that most of them are empty and you have to deal with the estate agent, I feel like sometimes information can get lost in translation, or it's hard to tell, is this landlord is he keen to and eager to sell quickly, or are they holding out? So you only find out once you put in that offer. Whereas the one I actually bought, I met the owner, she still lived there, and she did the viewing and more or less told me on the viewing that she'd had one sale fall through and she was quite desperate and keen to go. So, and nice lady. So we, and at that point we could establish a bit of a win-win for us both,
Yeah. Okay. What was the numbers on that and the whole process?
Yeah. So purchase price was 58,000. Yeah. I think it was up for 70. So I bought, as I say, bought that. I think it took about 8 weeks to exchange and complete. And then, the numbers on it, I get 525 in rent. I think it cash flows now, being that some of my bills have changed slightly. It cash flows about 280 a month now. When I first got it, it was about 250 a month, 260. Now it's about 280 a month. I didn't have to spend much on it because it needed updating, but I went up with my, talking about my parents and them supporting me, they came up with me. They couldn't quite work out why I'd bought a house 5 hours away, but they still came up with me, and we slept on the floor in the property, and over a few days just did what we could, a bit of plastering, painting, updating a bit of electrical works, because my dad's very hands-on. He's done a lot of courses and things in the past and stuff. So
courses in
like electrics, and he's done up a lot of houses as well. So he's quite hands-on like that, even though he's not a builder as such.
Yeah, that's quite handy actually, having that in the family. Massively sort of reduces the costs. So how quick was the sort of turnover from completion, getting the works done, and getting it rented out? What was the time frame?
It's about 5 or 6 weeks. So I got it on December 6th, so exactly a year tomorrow. When we bought it, we then probably spent like a week, and then I tried to get it on the rental market. Well, it's a bit over a week actually, but tried to get it on the rental market, and it took a couple of weeks to do that because there were certain things that the agents wanted me to update further for compliance reasons, which is fair enough, for the tenants. So by the time it hit the market, it was like the 20th of December, which isn't the best time to rent out a property when everyone's heading off for Christmas. But coming into the new year, we had quite a few viewings, and I think someone moved in the third week of January. So it's about 6 weeks, or maybe a bit long. Yeah, about 6 weeks, I'm sure, from when we finished the works to when it was rented.
Yeah, so that's not too bad. I suppose just that time of year, it's a little bit strange. Things organised. Okay, and so with that, are you now going to sort of scale your portfolio within Liverpool? I know you mentioned you eventually want to sort of wind down to the south. But focus within Liverpool.
Yeah, I'd still like another 1 or 2 there at least. It's been harder this year. Partly my own reasons. I've been a little bit nervous about investing with everything going on, and also because with all the pent-up demand, people are paying the asking, the market value for a property. When it's up for 70,000, and really you should pay 55, and then spend 10 on it. People are paying the full asking of 70,000. So it's been quite hard to compete with that. When I want to buy it slightly underpriced, I want to add a bit of value and immediately create some equity in that house. It's been quite hard to do so this year anyway. Hopefully next year it might ease out a bit.
No, absolutely. I think getting those discounts now with everything that's happening in the marketplace, I think just people are paying above ask and asking price, and it's just, yeah, it's not the right timing unless you've got access. But no, that's interesting. I mean, what made you go down the buy-to-let route? Because there's so many different strategies within property. You know, for you, I know you've got an end goal in mind, but for most people who are just starting out, why, you know, the buy-to-let route as opposed to all the other strategies?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, good point. It's always been the one that appealed to me because you own the asset. Obviously, you know, flipping property, equally, I like the idea of that because you can make a profit, you can get in and out quite quick. But yeah, buy to let is good because I think, you know, when you look at, again, I know, you know, people from the kind of baby boomer era, they just had one of the best periods in the market, you know, possible. But where a lot of them gained so much value is because they've, you know, held residential properties for 10, 20 years. You know, they've been in the residential market from the 80s or the 90s, and that's where all the growth's been. So I figured, look, if I could buy 5 or 10 houses, or, you know, and then I could sit on them for 20, 30 years, that's where the real magic happens. Obviously, you want them to cash flow in the meantime, and they're probably not going to appreciate much over the next 10 years. But if you hold them long term, that's where, you know, I'll hopefully retire a rich man. You never know.
Yeah, no, right. Have you got like a time frame you've got in mind? I know it's a constant moving target, but what is your sort of time frame as to when you're sack the day job sort of thing? You might want to carry on working, but at least you're in a position of choice. What's your sort of time frame?
Yeah, I mean, I said last year, I'd quite like within sort of 5 to 7 years have created enough side income, you know, passive income to replicate what I earn, or at least pay my bills, you know, and then what I'd probably do is look to continue working because I like where I work, but maybe reduce it by a day or two, you know, and stay working there, but work a bit less. And then I'd have time to do a bit of both. I think, you know, that's probably the plan. And then, but as I scale it up eventually, you know, I'd like to do my own thing full time.
Yeah. Okay, nice. And is your sort of strategy just adding on to that, just sort of buying and forgetting? So, you know, you've got someone managing it and, you know, you don't really want to sort of be landlord, so to speak, more as an investor. What's your...
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, you know, that's what I've done this year. I'm still very much hands-on in the sense that, you know, every time there's a bit of maintenance, they come to me and they get my sign off on it. And, you know, I want for the tenants to have a nice place to live. You know, at the end of the day, they've paid the whole way through what has been a difficult year for some, and I want to reward that. I don't know what the right word is, but, you know, I appreciate them doing that, so I want to make sure they've got a nice place to live.
Yeah. Okay. No, fair play. Congrats on that. I suppose coming up to your anniversary, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there's one thing I wanted to also sort of discuss, because there's something that you've done which is really interesting. I think I first sort of came across your content about a year ago, I think. And, you know, since then, you've obviously scaled your Instagram and YouTube. In terms of the plans that you've got moving forward, what are those plans? And, you know, how is what you're doing at the moment in terms of your social media going to help you achieve that? I think a lot of people are considering becoming a little bit more active on social media.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. Everyone should. Instagram kicked it off for me because I wanted there to be a face behind my property business that people could invest in the future. And I think there's two things that I wanted to provide or wanted to gain as well, I guess. So one of them is I wanted to provide content so that someone like myself back a couple of years ago could learn easier because I couldn't find out some of the information I wanted. So if someone could teach it in an easier, more digestible form, that's what I wanted to do. That was me giving value. And in return, I hoped that I might find some investors that will help me scale quicker. So they're the two main reasons in which I started it. Obviously, YouTube, I, again, put a lot more time into this year. You know, I'd made a video or two last year, but not put in any effort. And then this year, when lockdown came, I said, got more time. I'm at home more. Let's make some content. So, and that's probably the best decision of the year. You know, whilst I haven't managed to scale the properties business stuff very much this year, the YouTube, you know, giving value, meeting other people, and you know, I found a couple of investors through that I can work with going forward. And also it's become a revenue stream of its own, you know, which has been useful as well.
Yeah, oh, nice. But you're up to now 14,000 on YouTube. And
Yeah.
decent. And that was pretty much over this year. It's insane, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it was like 13 at the beginning of the year, 1-3. And then it's gone up to 14,000. It's all right.
Yeah. Were you just as surprised, or was there some conscious effort to building it up? Because I'm not familiar with the whole sort of YouTube algorithm and how it all works.
There's a bit of both. I mean, I put in a lot of effort into it behind the scenes, but surprised in the sense that people want to spend hours watching me. Yeah.
Awesome. So is that the strategy now, essentially? Because I think I've heard you say this once, it's important to get your first purchase under your belt with your own money. Is now the plan, you know, raising money through social media, etc., to scale your portfolio faster? And you know, is that the plan now? Or?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I have enough money to probably buy number 2 myself. But the way I look at it is I've got a couple of potential investors that want to work with me now. So rather than buy another one myself and then use their money to buy 3 and 4, you know, buy-to-lets 3 and 4, what if I actually use their money to buy number 2? And then if at any point along the way, I don't manage to, it doesn't work out as well, or there's any mistakes made, I've got the money as a buffer to be able to provide them security. But yeah, so yeah, over the next year or so, I hope to add at least another one buy-to-let in 2021, and through the investor finance and working with someone, teaching him along the way, because he wants to learn the process from the start to exchanging, completion to, you know, refurb and renting it out, and we both get value, hopefully. So
Nice. What are just the last sort of, before we sort of draw to an end, because I've taken a bunch of notes, so thanks again, you know, being on. What are the myths in terms of, you know, any myths that you can sort of bust for us in terms of property? You know, what are the common myths that people have about property investment, and that you can sort of debunk for us?
Probably that it's an overnight thing. You know, not targeting this at anyone in particular, but there's certain content out there to suggest that it will be done in a short period of time, under a month, you know, and you know, to suggest that you can become financially free in you know 1 or 2 weeks is a bit far-fetched in my opinion, and exaggerated. If you said, you know, maybe if you absolutely, you know, went balls to the wall for 3 months, you know, maybe you might be able to, but even then, you know, there's sourcing deals, getting rent to rent, there are time scales involved with these things. So I personally preach, you know, people playing the long game, essentially, which is buying, holding, and, you know, you're going to get rich over the next 5 and 10 years, not the next 5 and 10 weeks. I think there's less risk involved in that strategy. And I think that's where I think the whole mindset behind property and investing comes in. You know, you don't, if you're investing in stocks, for example, and you try and do it if you're trying to get rich in you know, a couple of weeks versus you trying to do it over a couple of years, I would imagine 9 times out of 10, the person that does it for a couple of years will come out much better than trying to, you know, skip the process and get rich quick.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there. When it does come to property, or I think any type of investing, time is always your friend, you know. And also, I think there's ways you can also sort of not hack it, but aggressively sort of progress down the line in terms of...
Yeah, I do agree. I do have to agree slightly there. And if you really go for it and you've got the time and you've got the knowledge and you just attack it aggressively, like you said, it can be done. Mm-hmm. But for the average Joe to go out and do it whilst working a 9 till 5, you know, it's quite difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, no worries at all. Look, thanks again, you know, for being on. Last little question I'd say is, what advice would you give someone, for instance, who is, working 9 to 5 full time, they're building up their sort of cash pot, and they want to get their first buy to let, for instance? What advice would you give them, and what are the sort of tips you would share?
I would say it's there's so many strategies in property, which is a great thing. There's so many routes you can go down, and I think we're all a victim of trying to do maybe more than one, or thinking about a few. And I think someone brand new needs to do is really review what they want out of property. Is your goal to be full time in 6 months, or is your goal to just have a retirement fund and a good investment portfolio, but you don't mind carrying on working? Because that will massively impact which route you go down. I recently had someone reach out in a funny manner and say to me, buy-to-lets are rubbish, they're dead, why are you investing in them? There's so much better strategies like commercial to residential conversions, HMOs. But they didn't give any thought to the fact that maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe that's not my strategy. I get that they're much higher cash flowing, but a standard buy-to-let where I don't have to get very involved, and yet it earns me nearly £300 profit, I'm happy with that, And if I could buy a few of them, I'm happy with that. So just do what works for you is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree that anymore, because now with social media, there's people who are showing they're doing, like you said, commercial to resis, HMOs, rent to rent, and all these different strategies. I think bottom line is just understand, where are you at the moment, and where do you want to get to, and work out a way to sort of bridge that gap.
Yeah.
Fall into a massive, massive trap. And I think my personal opinion, I'm not sure if you agree with it or not, but I think buy-to-let should always be the foundation. If you peel back, as all the people who are doing property development, commercials, etc., if you have a deep dive into their portfolio, it tends to be buy-to-lets that's sort of holding up everything else.
Yeah, it does. It's true. Yeah, it's very true. And yeah. I do agree.
Perfect, brilliant. No worries at all. Thanks again for coming on. I've really enjoyed it. I think, like I said, I've been sort of looking at your content over the last year, and somehow all of a sudden you was just gone through the roof. And you've got a really interesting story in terms of what you've done, and also things just within your employment and what you're yet to do. I think it's really interesting and of value. So thanks again for coming on. And
thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, we'll definitely have to do something face to face at some point.
Yeah.
When you get maybe Property 2, come down and see how it's all going.
Definitely. No, thanks for having me, and I hope it's useful as well. And anyone's welcome to contact me at any point for questions and that.
Yeah, absolutely. That takes me to the last thing. So where can people find you and reach out to you and check out your content?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to laugh, then head over to YouTube, see what I do on a daily basis. I do a mixture of sit-down content, for education, and I do vlogs as well. So YouTube and Instagram, it's just where you get me daily. You might be able to message me. I've got a website, justinwilkins.co.uk as well. Yeah, you'd have got the gist of what I'm about from this podcast, hopefully.
Brilliant, perfect. Justin, thanks again. It's been massive value. I hope everyone has also enjoyed it and taken as many notes as I have. Thanks again, Justin. And
thanks very much.